Imagine you're voting in an election, only to find out that the person you voted for lost. Yes, that would suck. And you'd feel like, wow, I have to deal 4 years with this other candidate that I did not vote for, because clearly it's not good for me. Now, imagine you're thinking about all this just to find out that, they won because people illegally voted for them. And that is a problem in our elections today, voter fraud. We have illegal immigrants as well as felons that are voting in our elections. And that sounds bad on paper as it should, but they are getting away with this because not every state requires voter ID. And I, as a firm believer, believe that voter ID, or at least some type of ID, is necessary to prevent this voter fraud in the elections. States like California, with 54 electoral votes, that's a lot, and that could really sway an election. They don't require any type of ID. That just seems a bit weird to me, as well as states like New York and Washington. Now, Ballotpedia and Heritage Foundation both argue that voter ID can stop multiple forms of election fraud. And Ballotpedia provides a list to go along with that to show which states use voter ID and which don't. As you can see over here, all the states in gray don't require an ID, starting from California and Washington and New York, while the yellow requires some type of ID, whether that is driver license, passport, or anything to at least prove you're an American citizen. Now, in blue, like Florida, you must have an ID, which makes sense. You're voting for a president in such a big election, why not have an ID? Now, an argument against that, from the article How America Works by Donovan, he claims that factors like age, race, education, and racial difference, as I already mentioned, race, yes, they exist and they alter the availability or as the factors that are needed to get an ID. How do we stop that? If you can't get a voter ID because of any of those things, find a way to get at least some type of ID, whether it is your driver's license, which most people have, or a passport, or at least a birth certificate, which you are given at birth, which shows that you're an American citizen. And to top that off, Hertzberg, who writes Political Observations and Arguments, in that article claims that because we have people who are voting illegally, there are those Americans who feel that voting is pointless and they just don't bother to vote because of it. My point consists of that argument, we all need to start voting, or rather, we need to vote the right way. The only way to do that is if we have a voter ID, or at least some type of ID. I personally strongly argue that we must take a stand and ensure that every state starts implementing these rules, because think about it like this: how is it fair, us Floridians, we need an ID to vote while there are people in California that don't? Where's the logic? How is that fair? Obviously they have more people, but they can't have any type of form of ID. That seems a bit unreasonable when it's such an important event like an election. Now, there are ways that we could do this. We could create petitions, which have worked in the past, and they are proven to be a non-violent form of protests. We can write blogs. We could bring it to the attention of local governments, which could pass it on to the higher ups. We must do something to ensure that our elections are legal and fair. Thank you for your time, and please consider everything I said.